Dr. Burns' History of Philosophy. Pre-philosophical thinking paradigm. Is philosophy useless? It's 620 BC in the bustling coastal city of Miletus, situated in what is now Turkey. In this thriving hub of commerce, a man known for his peculiar habits is walking, eyes fixed on the stars. Distracted by the celestial wonders above, he stumbled into a hole. The locals, amused, mocked him, suggesting he should focus on making money rather than stargazing. This man, often seen studying the heavens or lost in deep contemplation, was Thales, the first philosopher. His pursuits of knowledge were frequently ridiculed by the townspeople, who considered them impractical and disconnected from everyday realities. Thales, however, believed it was time to demonstrate that knowledge could indeed be a powerful instrument for wealth creation. Observing how stars and natural phenomena influenced weather patterns, he predicted a significant olive harvest for the following year. Acting on this foresight, he secured the exclusive rights to all the olive presses in Miletus and surrounding areas. Since no one else foresaw the opportunity, he acquired these rights at a low cost. When the bountiful harvest arrived, the demand for oil presses surged. With his monopoly, Thales was in a prime position to rent out the presses at premium rates, reaping substantial profits. This clever strategy not only proved his point, but also silenced his critics. Aristotle recounted the story of Thales' clever business venture not to conclude that knowledge should be pursued as a means of wealth and power. Rather, Aristotle intended the story to illuminate the joy of pursuing knowledge for knowledge's sake. This love of knowledge, the very core of philosophy, stands as the first academic discipline that begot all others, including mathematics, physics, and psychology. Philosophy is the mother of academia. Philosophy is not just an academic pursuit. It's a practical tool for everyone because it addresses how to manage our most precious resource, life itself. At its core, philosophy aims to answer the fundamental question of how to live a good life. This requires examining one's existence in light of its purposes and values. Although existentialists such as Sartre and Camus claimed that life doesn't have its own purpose, even they can't deny this. People's purpose in life is happiness. John Stuart Mill, arguably the most important utilitarian philosopher, stated that happiness is the summum bonum, the highest good. Everything else we desire is a means to obtain happiness. The pursuit of happiness is so universal that it's even enshrined in the American Declaration of Independence as an inalienable human right. So how should we pursue happiness? Let's hear the answer from Mill, who believed that the value of anything equals its utility. That is, no action, event, or state is valuable in itself, but always for its usefulness. In his exposition of the utilitarian doctrine of happiness, Mill states the following: "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." What Mill is saying is that there are different levels of happiness. The kind of happiness that we can share with pigs, like the pleasure we get from eating food, has the lowest utility. That is, it is the lowest degree of happiness. Human happiness must be different from swine happiness. Additionally, happiness is not solely about being satisfied with the condition one is in. This type of happiness is like the man in the movie Matrix who chose to remain in the world of the Matrix as long as he has power and wealth, even though he knows that the reality is that he is just used as a battery to power the illusory Matrix world. That man amounts to a fool satisfied. Mill claims that the one who enjoys the highest level of happiness is Socrates dissatisfied. What does Socrates do? He does philosophy. That is, he pursues knowledge. But wait, why is Socrates dissatisfied? Dissatisfied and happy don't seem to go together. Excellent question. This is why. The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to discover. Like climbing a hill only to see a mountain range beyond. The Delphic oracle declared Socrates to be the wisest man not because he knew the most, but because he knew he didn't know much, unlike all others who thought they knew everything. Discovering that we don't know much is far from discouraging. On the contrary, it becomes a source of wonder and continued motivation for learning. Albert Einstein said, "He who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe is as good as dead." His eyes are closed. To lose wonder and to think you know everything is to be a butterfly with clipped wings, alive but earthbound, blind to the kaleidoscope of life's marvels unfurling in every breeze. Philosophizing or pursuing knowledge provides us moments of being wrapped in awe of one's ephemeral existence in this vast universe. Given that the highest level of happiness is achieved through philosophy, contrary to being useless, philosophy is the most useful thing in the pursuit of happiness. Philosophy, as we've concluded, offers valuable insights into the pursuit of happiness. To further illuminate this path, let us embark on a journey through the annals of philosophical history. The history of philosophy is not merely an accumulation of opinions from various philosophers which can be reduced to bullet points. On the contrary, the history of philosophy is a progressive evolution, an iteration of the Hegelian thesis-antithesis-synthesis process. It's a self-correcting, ever-advancing march of ideas that rejects previous paradigms and presents new ones that meet the intellectual demands of their time. In this way, each philosophical system becomes a product of its own zeitgeist, constrained by its own socio-political premises. As in most areas, a full grasp of the significance and contribution of philosophical theories happens retrospectively. Hegel eloquently expressed this wisdom of hindsight being 20/20 like this: "The owl of Minerva first takes flight with twilight closing in." Join us as we witness Minerva's owl taking flight over the landscape of the history of philosophy, the evolution of human thought and wisdom throughout the ages. In this first episode, we explore the mode of thinking that existed before philosophy. Philosophy, as we know it, began in the 6th century BCE with Thales, who pursued knowledge and beliefs that could be justified through observation and reason. But the question arises, how did people think before the advent of philosophy? To answer this question, we must look as far back as possible into human thinking in written form. When we do, we find some of the most influential books in the Western history of ideas: the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bible, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. While these texts differ in various aspects, they share a common paradigm of thinking: myth-making through storytelling. This pre-philosophical approach to understanding the world and human experience was dominant for millennia before the emergence of systematic philosophical inquiry. To uncover the essence of this pre-philosophical paradigm, let's examine how legends tell legendary stories. We'll begin with one of the oldest stories available in written form, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Hero Face Number 1. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Mesopotamian epic poem about the legendary Gilgamesh, a king of the Sumerian city-state called Uruk. The epic Sumerian story was gathered and compiled in the Akkadian language when the Akkadian Empire conquered Sumeria around 2150 BCE, hundreds of years after the fall of Uruk. Imagine a literature etched into clay over 4,000 years ago. The Epic of Gilgamesh is humanity's oldest known written story. Following the legendary story, the king had not been a benevolent ruler. While blessed with strength and beauty beyond compare, Gilgamesh was tyrannical, and his people suffered under his whims. The gods, hearing the cries of the oppressed, crafted a solution. Enkidu, a wild man of nature, was created to be Gilgamesh's equal and temper his cruel ways. Enkidu, raised by beasts, is lured into the civilization of Uruk, where he and Gilgamesh clash in an earth-shaking battle. But from this conflict, an unbreakable bond is forged. The two become inseparable friends, ready to take on the world together. Their first great adventure leads them to the dreaded cedar forest, home of the terrifying demon Humbaba. With divine aid from the sun god Shamash and their own mortal courage, they face this monstrous guardian of the forest. Their victory over Humbaba appointed by the god Enlil himself, marks their first act of audacity against the divine order. Returning victorious, Gilgamesh catches the eye of Ishtar, goddess of love and war. But when he spurns her advances, her fury knows no bounds. She unleashes the mighty bull of heaven, a beast so powerful its very breath creates chasms in the earth. Yet even this divine monster falls before the combined might of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, marking their second great act of defiance against the gods. But the gods are not finished with our heroes. For their audacity in slaying both Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, the gods strike down Enkidu to death. Grieving the death of his friend and confronted for the first time with the specter of his own mortality, Gilgamesh embarks on a quest more daring than any before, to discover the secret of everlasting life itself. Across treacherous lands, pushing through a crucible of suffering with perseverance, he seeks Utnapishtim, the immortal man who survived the Great Flood. Utnapishtim was granted immortality by the gods after building an ark and surviving the Great Flood sent by the gods to destroy mankind. When he finally meets the immortal flood survivor, Utnapishtim reveals that the gods will never grant eternal life to mortals like Gilgamesh. With his hopes for immortal life crushed, Gilgamesh is humbled. He comes to understand and make peace with human finitude in a profound way. The once brash king returns to his city of Uruk a changed man, having uncovered deep truths about the human condition. Having failed to obtain literal immortality, Gilgamesh comes to embrace his mortality, but secures an enduring legacy and form of metaphorical immortality by rededicating himself to his nation Uruk, the great city and civilization he had founded and built up, which would outlive him as his ultimate achievement. The Epic of Gilgamesh stands as a timeless masterpiece that weaves together themes of friendship, mortality, adventure, and personal transformation. This ancient tale follows Gilgamesh's journey from a tyrannical ruler to a humbled and wiser man, shaped by his deep bond with Enkidu and his quest for immortality. As Gilgamesh returns home, forever changed by his experiences, the epic sets a template for heroic narratives that would resonate for millennia to come. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the first example of the hero's journey, a concept that Joseph Campbell explored in his seminal work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. This ancient tale exemplifies the monomyth structure of departure, initiation, and return that Campbell identified across diverse cultures and time periods. Gilgamesh's quest for immortality and meaning mirrors the journeys of countless heroes in literature and mythology. From Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey to modern protagonists like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars or Neo in The Matrix. Beyond its literary significance, the Epic of Gilgamesh offers profound insights into the ancient human psyche, addressing timeless existential questions and the search for purpose beyond mere survival. This enduring narrative not only shaped the literary landscape for generations, but continues to resonate with contemporary audiences, providing a window into the universal human experience and inspiring countless heroes' journeys across all media. As such, it cements its place as a foundational text in world literature, demonstrating the enduring power of storytelling to explore the human condition. The Bible. Isaac and Abraham foretell the New Testament. When discussing influential ancient literary works, one cannot overlook the Bible. While the Epic of Gilgamesh is heralded as the earliest known literary masterpiece, the Bible as we know today can be viewed as the longest to be compiled into one book, taking over 1,500 years to complete by numerous authors across vastly different eras and regions. The books that make up the Old Testament were written over approximately 1,000 years, beginning with the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, authored by Moses around 1400 BCE. The last books of the Old Testament, such as Malachi, were completed by 400 BCE. After several centuries, the New Testament books were written over a period of around 50 to 70 years in the 1st century CE. The Bible, divided into the Old and New Testaments, presents a cohesive narrative that spans from the creation of the world through the fall of humanity into sin to God's ongoing promise and plan for humanity's redemption. More specifically, the Old Testament chronicles God's covenant with Abraham, the nation of Israel, and their subsequent history of disobedience and God's judgment. The New Testament culminates this story with the arrival of Jesus Christ, the promised Messiah, who fulfilled Old Testament prophecies. His life, death, and resurrection offer salvation and reconciliation with God. The last book, Revelation, provides a glimpse into the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan, the return of Christ and the establishment of the new heaven and new earth. This unity and continuity are essential to understanding the Bible's message. To bridge the two testaments, biblical scholars employ a method called typology. This interpretive approach identifies people, events, or objects in the Old Testament that foreshadow or prefigure corresponding elements in the New Testament. Typology reveals God's consistent patterns of action throughout history, highlighting the continuity between the two testaments and the Bible's overarching narrative. One prominent example of typology is the parallel between Isaac in the Old Testament and Jesus in the New Testament. Isaac, the son of Abraham, is seen as a type of Christ. Both were promised sons. Isaac was miraculously born to elderly parents, while Jesus was the promised Messiah born of a virgin. Both were offered as sacrifices by their fathers. Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac, foreshadowing God the Father offering his son Jesus on the cross. Isaac carried the wood for his own sacrifice up the mountain, just as Jesus carried his own cross. The location of these events holds significance. Both Isaac's near sacrifice and Jesus' crucifixion occurred in the region of Mount Moriah. The 3-day period between Isaac's departure and return and Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection also resonate as symbolic. Both demonstrated unwavering obedience to their father's will, exemplifying submission to God's plan. The dramatic rescue of Isaac by God's provision of a ram foreshadows the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus, who was offered as the Lamb of God to redeem humanity. Scholars believe there is literary continuity and influence between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible, though the extent of direct borrowing is debated. The most evident connection is the striking similarity between the flood narratives in Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Both flood stories originate from the same broad geographic region, ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. While the Bible's monotheistic perspective differs from Gilgamesh's polytheistic worldview, this literary continuity suggests that the biblical authors were familiar with and engaged the ancient Mesopotamian work, either through direct influence or by crafting a distinct Judeo-Christian narrative lens on shared ancient Near Eastern concepts and myths. The Bible tries to answer some of life's biggest questions. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What happens when we die? It talks about finding wisdom and understanding our place in the world. It's like a guide to help us make sense of our lives and find purpose. The philosophical impact of the Christian God through the Bible is immense, profoundly shaping Western thought for millennia. As Christianity became the paradigmatic thinking, philosophers and theologians grappled with understanding the nature of God, his role in the workings of the universe, and his relationship to humans. The Bible describes God as all-knowing, all-powerful, and completely good, attributes that have been subjects of extensive philosophical inquiry and debate. Central to these discussions is the problem of evil. If God is all benevolent and loving, why does suffering exist? Medieval scholars aimed to provide a coherent picture of God and explain away this dilemma, with thinkers like Thomas Aquinas developing complex philosophical systems to reconcile faith and reason. However, as philosophical thought evolved, particularly during the Enlightenment era, new concepts emerged. Deism, for instance, viewed God as a watchmaker who created the universe but does not intervene in human affairs, driving a wedge between God and human relationships. The question of free will versus determinism has been another persistent philosophical problem. How can God's omniscience and omnipotence be reconciled with human free will? This inquiry leads to broader questions about the nature of human consciousness and the mind-body problem. Philosophers have long debated how God might cause our mind and body to work together, contributing to discussions about dualism and materialism. These philosophical inquiries, stemming from the Christian conception of God, have influenced various branches of philosophy, including metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. They have shaped our understanding of morality, the nature of existence, and how we can know God. From ontological arguments for God's existence to debates about the source of moral values, the impact of biblical concepts of God on philosophy has been profound and enduring, continuing to inspire philosophical discourse to this day. The Iliad and the Odyssey. Oscar-worthy storytelling. To complete our picture of the pre-philosophical thinking paradigm, we need to discuss the Iliad and the Odyssey, written in the 8th century BCE. Both books relate to the Trojan War, which happened around 1250 BCE. The Iliad, meaning Song of Ilion, or Poem of Troy, focuses on events before the war's end, while the Odyssey chronicles Odysseus's perilous journey home after the war. To the question of who wrote these two books, scholars tend to agree that Homer is the author. The most critical evidence for this comes from the storytelling method. The Bible and the Epic of Gilgamesh follow a more chronological structure, with a clear beginning, middle, and ending. This style of storytelling is called ab ovo, meaning from the egg. It signifies starting a narrative at the absolute beginning, including the origin story and all the lead up to the main plot. This chronological style allows later authors to add more details corresponding to the time of events. Both the Iliad and the Odyssey, however, do not start from the beginning. It is well known how the Trojan War began. The Trojan prince Paris abducted the most beautiful woman in Greece, Helen. Helen's husband asks his big brother Agamemnon to wage war against Troy to return Helen. But that's not how the Iliad starts. We find ourselves not at the dawn of the Trojan War, but in its tumultuous 9th year, with the furious rage of Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior. Similarly, the Odyssey does not start from, okay, now that we've won the Trojan War, let's go back home to Greece. Agamemnon went this way, and Odysseus went that way. Instead, the book begins with Odysseus a decade into his perilous journey home, stranded on the nymph Calypso's island and yearning for his kingdom of Ithaca. Homer's way of telling stories is like jumping into the middle of an exciting movie. Instead of starting at the beginning, he drops us right into the action. This is called in medias res, which means in the middle of things. It's a clever trick that grabs our attention right away. Homer doesn't just tell us what happened in order. He mixes up the past, present, and future to keep us guessing. This style shows that Homer had a clear plan for his whole story from the start. He carefully decides when to reveal important information about the characters and their past. showing us both the great things people can do and the big mistakes they can make. This way of storytelling is tricky and needs one person with a strong vision to make it work well. That's why many experts think Homer was probably one talented storyteller, not a group of people adding bits to the story over time. Homer stands as an Oscar-worthy storyteller before such accolades existed. The Oscars are given not just for entertainment value, but for touching on universal human values that resonate across cultures and time. Consider one of the most entertaining movies of all time, the epic film Ben-Hur, which moves us deeply because it explores universal human values such as redemption, faith, justice, loyalty and betrayal, family bonds, perseverance, the corrupting nature of power, compassion, hope, and renewal. Homer crafted narratives that resonate with these same universal human values, far beyond mere entertainment. His mastery lies in juxtaposing similar events to explore profound themes that echo through the ages. The Iliad. Consider the Iliad, which begins with Achilles' fury. What ignited his wrath? Remarkably, it mirrors the very cause of the Trojan War itself, the taking of a woman. Paris's abduction of Helen sparked a decade-long conflict. Just like the reason for the war itself, Achilles' anger stems from the abduction of a woman. This is the backstory. For 9 grueling years, the Greek forces laid siege to the towering walls of Troy in their relentless campaign to reclaim Helen. At the forefront was their champion Achilles, leading his elite Myrmidon warriors into every bloody battle with unwavering fury and skill, claiming countless Trojan lives. In one such conquest, the Greeks plundered a neighboring Trojan town. Among the spoils were 2 beautiful women, Chryseis and Briseis. Chryseis was awarded to Agamemnon, the headstrong leader of the Greek alliance, while Briseis became a prize for Achilles himself. However, Chryseis' father, a humble priest of Apollo, begged for his daughter's return and offered an immense ransom. But Agamemnon refused with disdain, impiously disregarding the priest's pleas. This infuriated the god Apollo, who rained a terrible plague upon the Greek camp. To appease Apollo's wrath, the seer Calchas revealed that the king must return Chryseis. Although Agamemnon complied, he demanded recompense, the maiden Briseis, the very woman seized as a prize by Achilles. In a staggering display of dominance, Agamemnon's men marched into Achilles' camp and tore Briseis from his quarters. As she was dragged away weeping, her anguished cries echoed across the Achaean encampment. For Achilles, it was the ultimate insult. His honor disgraced, his hard-won prize snatched away on a king's whim. Briseis' beauty was unmatched, even in that age of legends. But it was not her fair face that stirred Achilles' rage. It was the insult, the degradation of having this prize seized by the very king who led the campaign Achilles fought in. Achilles had been fighting to reclaim Helen, abducted by the Trojans. Now a woman had been taken from him by his own supposed ally. His legendary wrath burned hotter than the fires of Troy itself. So began Achilles' self-imposed exile from the war as he stormed away from Agamemnon's forces, his Myrmidons at his side, watching from the sidelines as the tide turned in favor of the Trojans. Just as Paris's abduction of Helen sparked the Trojan War, Agamemnon's abduction of Briseis ignited Achilles' furious rage, nearly unraveling the Greek alliance from within. The storyteller understood that behind the guise of a just cause, wars are truly waged over more primal things like hurt pride. It was this perceived insult over a woman that shaped the most pivotal moments of the Trojan War in the epic Iliad. The Odyssey. One of the most intriguing juxtapositions in the Odyssey is about the homecoming event. The Odyssey begins near the end of Odysseus' 10-year wandering in the sea, now stranded on the island of the nymph Calypso, where he was kept for 7 years, longing for home. His patron goddess Athena helps Odysseus escape from Calypso's island. After escaping Calypso's island, Odysseus sails on a raft until Poseidon's storm destroys it. He struggles in the sea for 2 days, aided by a sea nymph's magical veil, before reaching Phaeacia. Exhausted, he collapses under olive trees, where Princess Nausicaa discovers him. Phaeacia becomes his last stop before Ithaca, where he is a guest of honor at a party thrown for him. At this gathering, Odysseus recounts the story of his long and perilous journey since leaving Troy, including his encounters with the Cyclops, Circe, the Sirens, and other adventures. After hearing his tale, the Phaeacians are moved to help Odysseus and provide him with a ship to finally return to Ithaca. His final journey to Ithaca happens while he is asleep on a ship sailed by the Phaeacians. The only remaining adventure left unknown for Odysseus is what will happen when he arrives in his homeland. Odysseus has foreboding of his own homecoming when he meets his dear friend Agamemnon during a visit to the underworld, the place for dead souls. There, Odysseus is surprised to meet the ghost of Agamemnon. Agamemnon tells Odysseus how he ended up being there. "As you know, Odysseus, my journey home was anything but smooth. I took a certain prize with me from Troy. Cassandra, the beautiful prophetess. You know the one, cursed by Apollo to see the future clearly, yet have no one believe her words. She was a gift, a tragic one from the gods. She warned me day and night of the darkness awaiting me back home. Of Clytemnestra's rage, a tempest brewing in my absence. She spoke of betrayal, of blood on the palace floor. But like a fool, I dismissed her visions as the ravings of a captive. And so I returned a conqueror, only to fall victim to a plot hatched within my own halls. Clytemnestra, once the love of my youth, had transformed into a viper, her heart poisoned by grief and revenge. I knew she was angry with me for sacrificing our daughter to the goddess for a safe passage to Troy 10 years ago, but I never imagined she would plot my murder upon my return. With her lover, Aegisthus, she murdered me and Cassandra during a celebratory banquet. A king brought low by a queen's treachery. The prophecy, so clear, so chilling, had come to pass. His friend's tragic tale profoundly influenced Odysseus' actions upon his return to Ithaca. Aware of the potential dangers that might await him, Odysseus chose to disguise himself as a beggar rather than to reveal his identity immediately. This cautious approach allowed him to assess the loyalty of those in his household and the situation at home. Who do you think recognized Odysseus first? His dog, Argos. Despite Odysseus' disguise and the passage of 20 years, the old Argos immediately recognizes his master. Too weak to approach, Argos wags his tail and drops his ears, acknowledging Odysseus before peacefully dying, having fulfilled his lifelong wait for his master's return. This moment of pure, unconditional loyalty reassures Odysseus that true faithfulness still exists. He also has his moment of, "I am your father," with his now grown son, Telemachus. The father and son, along with a few loyal servants, plan to reclaim his kingdom, now overrun by suitors who had feasted on Odysseus' wealth, vying for Penelope's hand and the throne of Ithaca. Penelope had announced a contest. Whoever could string Odysseus' great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads would win her hand in marriage. The suitors, cocky and confident, failed one after another, their arms trembling under the bow's unyielding strength. The disguised hero asked to try the bow. Amid mockery, he strung it effortlessly and shot an arrow through all 12 axe heads. Revealing himself, he declared, "The game is over," and killed the lead suitor. Chaos erupted as his son and loyal servants joined the fight. The unarmed suitors fell quickly to the hero's skill. After the slaughter, the hall was cleansed and disloyal servants were punished. This dramatic scene marks the hero's return and vengeance after his long absence. As dawn broke over Ithaca, Odysseus, now cleaned and regally attired, finally revealed himself to Penelope. The final test is a clever trap set by Penelope to prove Odysseus' true identity beyond any doubt. Penelope orders the servant to move their marriage bed, knowing it's immovable as Odysseus built it around a living olive tree. This secret is known only to them. Odysseus, angered by the suggestion, describes in detail how he constructed the bed. His intimate knowledge proves his identity, and Penelope, overcome with emotion, finally embraces her long-lost husband. This clever test demonstrates their deep bond and marks their climactic reunion. In contrast to Agamemnon's swift but tragic return, Odysseus' long, arduous homecoming is ultimately triumphant. This juxtaposition highlights the Odyssey's central themes of loyalty, perseverance, and cunning. It's better to be lucky than to be good. Imagine stepping into a world where the veil between mortal and divine is gossamer thin, a realm untouched by the cold logic of philosophy. Here, the epics of Gilgamesh, the Bible, Iliad and Odyssey aren't mere stories, they're the very threads weaving the fabric of existence. In this captivating universe, gods and humans dance an intricate waltz across separate yet intertwined realms. Divine will isn't just a concept, it's the invisible hand shaping every aspect of life, from the grandest epic to the most mundane task. Law, order, and justice don't stem from mortal courts, but flow like rivers from the whims of celestial beings. Picture yourself navigating this enchanted landscape. How would you find your way when the very ground beneath your feet might shift at a god's caprice? The answer, whispered in temples and shouted from mountaintops, is both simple and profound. To live well is to be loved by the gods. Ah, but here's where the plot thickens. Fortune's fickle smile beams upon the divinely favored, while others toil in the shadow of hardship. This cosmic lottery raises a question that would make even the boldest philosopher's head spin. How does one win divine love? This puzzle spawned countless theories. Was it a birthright? Did the gods favor those already blessed with beauty, intellect, or virtue? Or was there a universal standard of lovability that even the gods recognized? Yet, observations complicated these theories. Consider the tragedies that fall on the talented Theban king Oedipus, as told by Sophocles. As a young man, Oedipus learns from an oracle that he is destined to kill his father and marry his mother. Attempting to outsmart fate, he flees his home in Corinth, unaware that his parents there are adoptive. Meanwhile, his biological parents, the king and queen of Thebes, had abandoned him as an infant due to a similar prophecy. On his journey, Oedipus encounters an old man in a carriage at a crossroads. An argument breaks out between them over who has the right of way. In the heat of the moment, Oedipus kills the older man and his attendants. He then arrives in Thebes, where he solves the riddle of the Sphinx, becoming a hero and subsequently the king. He marries the recently widowed queen, Jocasta, and they have 4 children, including a daughter named Antigone. Years later, when a plague strikes Thebes, Oedipus learns the horrifying truth. The old man he killed at the crossroads was his own father Laius, and the woman he married, Jocasta, is his mother. Horrified by his unwitting crimes of patricide and incest, Oedipus gouges out his own eyes and wanders in exile, eventually dying in Athens. His daughter Antigone, who accompanies him in exile, later returns to Thebes and meets her own tragic fate when her uncle, now king of Thebes, puts her to death for disobeying his decree by burying her dead brother's body. Her brothers had died in a duel, both claiming kingship of Thebes. Oedipus is clearly a talented man, as demonstrated by solving the Sphinx's riddle and rising to become king from nothing. However, his brilliance was matched by his hubris, and overconfidence in his own ability and the belief that he could outsmart fate itself. This overconfidence led him to dismiss warnings and prophecies, unknowingly setting in motion the very events he sought to avoid. The gods used Oedipus's own hubris to enact a brutal downfall, stripping him of his kingship, family, and sight as retribution for his excessive defiance of divine prophecy. In the end, Oedipus's tale serves as a stark reminder that even the most gifted individuals can fall victim to their own arrogance, suggesting that the gods' love does not depend on the good qualities a person possesses. This worldview suggests that being favored by the gods, seen as luck, is far more important than personal merit, ability, or morality. Exceptional talent was often viewed as a double-edged sword. It could lead to hubris and invite divine punishment. This made extraordinary skill more of a liability than an asset. Divine intervention acted as a great equalizer in myths. Gods could elevate the lowly or bring down the mighty on a whim. In this context, luck, or divine favor, emerges as a force more potent than individual ability or virtue. Ultimately, in ancient mythological thinking, being in the gods' good graces could trump all other factors. This reinforces the idea that divine blessing was indeed more valuable than personal excellence.